and I welcome you all today. We have Mr. Suvijan with us. Uh, Mr. Suvijan is working for RVNL, and if you had the opportunity to know about him or meet him before, you would have definitely remembered him. And he's contributing a lot towards the industry, and we will be having a nice talk with him today. Uh, to say a little bit about Mr. Sumit Jain, he did his graduation from Delhi Technical University in 2005. He is currently AGM and project director of 125-kilometer long Rishikesh to Karnaprayag rail line project uh, for RBNL. He has various associations with various societies such as Rock Mechanics, Sectional Committee of PIS, Tunneling Association of India, ISRM, ISRMTT, and IGS. He has worked before with NTPC and he has 6 years of experience with Indian Railways. He has been working for working for maintenance and construction of new railway tracks and bridges, and he was in charge of about 400 kilometers of railway line in his career. Later on, he joined RVNL, and he has about 8 years of experience with RVNL. He is now responsible for development and planning of Rishikesh Karnaprayag new railway line project and to do the feasibility, detailed designs, approval, construction, supervision, uh, and many other responsibilities such as contract procurement and and taking it through to until completion uh, in, with safety and commissioning the line until the end. He is in charge of 3 out of 9 construction packages as of now, and there are various tunnels that are in this project. Some longer than 10 kilometers as well, and many bridges. He's one of the tunnels is going to be bored through TBM, both single track TBM, two TBMs drilling two tunnels parallel to each other. He is having the responsibility of managing the contract for about 8,000 crore rupees, which uh, has a construction scope of about 220 kilometers of tunnel. And the commencement is planned between June 2020 to May 2021. So it's a very tough project in a tough location and with very stringent uh, uh, project commissioning guidelines for project commissioning date. He has been involved with various activities such as to enhance productivity and to improve the contract using updated specifications, uh, to do the life cycle assessment and its comparison with the cost, technical and contractual frameworks which he has designed for tunnel construction, and uh, and to look after the consultancy works of the railway project. And he's regularly involved with with the international guidelines and including them into the contracts that he is executing. So, so with this, I invite Mr. Sumit Jain to please take over, and I welcome you on behalf of TIYM uh, that you joined us today and showed the interest to interact with our young members. Welcome.
Thank, yeah, thank you, Sandeep, and thank you, Tai YM, for having me here today. And hello to all participants. I hope everybody is keeping safe during these tough times. And it will be a great. Uh, it will require great efforts to come out of this COVID, as it is happening around the world. But let's keep the spirits high. And thank you once again for having me here, Sandeep.
Thank you, sir. So, it's actually a good opportunity that you have been working on such a great nice project there, and we had opportunity to meet you, to talk with you, to interact and to learn how how you are able to manage things there. Uh, but to start with your
Mhm.
career, uh, so that we know what things you have been going through since the start of your career, would you like to explain? Would you like to share some of their details from your education and early career?
Yes, yes, definitely. See, right after graduation from DTU, I was supposed to join MTech at IIC Bangalore for MTech in structures, and but I thought it was better to have some practical experience and then do the masters. So then I joined NTPC in 2005, and in NTPC I joined there as a first batch of hydropower engineers, and I received an extensive training on the hydropower engineering and got opportunity to work in the field for a coal dam hydropower project. It is a 800 megawatt hydropower project in Himachal Pradesh. So it was under construction at that time. And subsequently, I also worked in design of hydropower projects for Lohari Nagpala project in Uttarakhand. And it was as early as 2006 that I had already developed a liking for the subject of tunneling, and rock mechanics was very close to me. And also, NTPC was doing a lot of hydropower projects involving tunneling at that time. So it kept me into involved into all these subjects. And however, in 2006, I got a call from the prestigious Indian Railway Services to join there as a railway engineer. And those days, it was a dream job for everybody, for every civil engineer. And it was at that time that I put my plans for further studies on hold, and I joined the Indian Railway Service with a zeal to work for the country. Indian Railways, after I joined Indian Railways, I got a very lot of opportunities, like because Railways is like such a big organization. There are many works going on from time to time, and it really tests your skills and upgrades your understanding related to special engineering service, geotechniques, and then structural engineering, manpower management, and numerous other fields you can imagine of in both maintenance as well as new construction. So after working for 6 years, I again felt that something is missing, and I started looking for avenues to pursue my passion of tunneling. Actually, the job in railways had become somewhat monotonous, and so in 2012, in order to break this monotony, I gave a I and given the technical expertise that I had gained in the by working in the Indian Railways, I decided to join this project. This is a Rishikesh Kanpurag new rail line project, as Sandeep has introduced to you. And initially, I joined here for 5 years, and then gradually the concept of NATM was also there because we were working on trying to understand what all new things I have missed while I was in railways. Now, after going through all the updations and upgradations and latest know-how in the field, I find myself in a perfect shape to handle this project. And I have already left Indian Railways last year, and I've decided to pursue the passion of tunneling for the rest of my life. RVNL has been executing many railway projects involving tunneling in the Himalayas, and I feel it is my duty to help the country in augmenting the railway infrastructure in the hills in the best possible manner.
Great, great. It was a really interesting career story from you, Mr. Sumit. You can switch on your video if you want.
My my
It's
video is
actually,
already my video is already on.
uh, I can't see it.
No, no,
Akshay, Shweta, are you able
Yes,
to see the video?
it's
whenever he is speaking, we can see him.
yeah,
Oh, that's fine. That's fine.
yeah, yeah.
It must be something with uh, my software then, but should be
Okay.
fine if you can see it. Uh, so it's quite great the way you have built your career. And from when you were doing your graduation in civil engineering. I remember there were hardly any formal courses which taught tunneling as a subject. But now there are a few courses which teaches tunneling as a subject. So do you miss having read it uh, as a subject in your uh, graduation, or do you think it would have helped? Or what do you think if students have opportunity to learn it beforehand? Is it Do you think it's going to help them?
Personally, Sandeep, I would say that all subjects are there in the graduation during graduation, and they are not taught to that detail. I mean, if tunnel engineering was being taught to me in those details, maybe I would have joined. I would not have joined. I mean, people usually students tend to decide on this specialization towards the end of their graduation. So, but yes, if somebody has decided to go to enter this field, definitely it would have helped him in graduation if it was taught to him as a subject.
Yeah, great. I think it in my opinion as well. I think students are lucky that the market in India is growing, which has led to floating of more courses formally in the universities to teach them tunneling as a subject, and which is giving them a kickstart to understand the behavior of ground and allowing them uh, to be a part of the industry with some skills already at hand, and to learn it in the field right from the beginning. So moving on to the Rishikesh Karnpraya project that you were mentioning, uh, how do you think it changed your career? Like, do you want to share uh, details about the project that you found, things that you found very interesting, or maybe share some photographs, or so that we can feel connected as well?
Yes, definitely. I would like to share some details on the project first, and then I'll answer the remaining part of the question. So I hope my screen is visible to everybody.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. Okay. So actually, this project is 125 kilometers long. It is showing the map with China, India's boundary with China, and the location of the project in red. The red line shows the alignment, and mainly the project was conceived to connect the international, to have good mobility on the borders, and to connect trade centers and prevent migration of population, and also to increase the tourism and ease of access to the Hindu pilgrimage centers that we have in the state of Uttarakhand. And this is a map showing the terrain of that area. You can see that the project is starting from the foothills of Himalayas from at Rishikesh, and it goes all the way up to Karnprayag. So you can see that the entire area of this region is highly mountainous. I would say Uttarakhand is almost 80% mountainous in that sense. So what we are doing is actually we are extending the existing railway network, which is shown in black dotted lines, and this is a zoomed image of the alignment. So we have certain stations shown as Rishikesh, Puri, Byasi, Devprayag, and the showing the terrain. So we carried out the final location survey for this project, which is also called a preliminary design in 2013, between 2013 to 2016. Through a consultancy contract. And during the initial project development stage, I learned a lot about satellite surveys because we were collecting satellite images of this area. We were doing topographical survey on the ground. We were doing DGPS surveys. We were creating digital elevation models of the entire region. Uh, uh, I mean, the corridor in which the project was supposed to come up. So I learned a lot of these things. I learned GIS in particular, geographic information systems, construction capabilities and design challenges, handling these things to develop the project of such a magnitude in this environmentally sensitive Himalayas, and the importance of proper alignment selection and identification of all the geological features which are affecting the possible alignment options really is a Herculean task. And it was with good planning, we really learned a lot. I mean, with good learning, it was a cakewalk for us. Like important subjects like these were part of a daily discussion. I'll just share the if you can see on the screen, these we studied 52 alignment options for this project. All these alignments are shown in different colors. Sandeep, by the way, can you confirm if my screen is there?
Yes, we can very well see it.
Okay, so you can see all the alignment options in different colors, and we were numbering them, and then and there were multiple station locations. Like there is a particular area in the topography, so to decide a station, you need a flat lay of land, and that flat lay of land can be at a different elevation. So deciding on which elevation to pick up was really a challenge for us, and it depends on a lot of things. I mean, I cannot explain all the things in this session today, but it was really challenging, and it really diverted all my attention towards this new emerging subject on which I never got to work before. And then on this project, we also implemented a systematic risk reduction with regard to the construction time and the challenges and the functionality of the railways, the operational and safety requirements of the railways, how it is going to be maintained in future by the Indian Railways. And then there were various geological considerations, there were environmental and social impact considerations, and of course, there was the cost of the project. I mean, we couldn't have just selected any alignment which was having the tallest bridge or the longest tunnel. We had to do something which was giving the maximum benefit in the least cost. And for that, we did the multi-criteria analysis by giving weightages to different topics like construction, time, then cost, functionality, operation-wise, and all these things which I just mentioned. We learned to acquire on this project the various geological and geotechnical information in a phased manner, because as you are aware that you don't require all the information on stage one. In stage one, you just need to have some paper study or some literature survey or some field survey, and then gradually you build on the project with more and more information. And the appropriate level of detail actually is getting decided by the design stage of the project. So that is what we learned here. And I'll just give you brief on the timelines of the project. So if you can see my screen, I have shown 7 stages. So we worked in stage 1 on the paper feasibility. Then on stage 2, we worked on the field feasibility, in which we studied the field features on the ground along the corridor. Then in stage 3, we did a preliminary design, and this was done by consultants. And then in stage 4, we went on to the geotech investigations and other additional investigations. So this was in 2017-18. Let me tell you, the sanction of the ministry was obtained in 2017. So after the sanction of the ministry, we started with the geotech investigations for the purpose of preparing a geotechnical data report. Then we prepared interpretive and the baseline reports. We did the design, and we studied the interface of civil, electromechanical, and signal and other communication infrastructures. So this was in 2018 to 2020. And then we started to procure, once we have designed the project to our confidence level, and then we are procuring the major tunnel and bridge construction contracts. This was happening in 2020 to 21. actually started in 2019, but I'm mentioning 2022 for a clarity. And then this COVID impacted us like anything. I mean, when you get such a big challenge and already the project is huge, and the challenge we faced in the initial stages of the procurement of the contract were enormous. Really, we had to like put in a lot of efforts to manage the to avoid any delays to the project. We were working. We were perhaps the first one to have a pre-bid meeting over the video conferencing in April 2020. So all things were like we innovated a lot of things, how to finalize the tenders online because of this COVID. Then finally in 2021 we are here, and almost all the procurements have been done, and we have started the construction of tunnel and bridges on the project. So actually, with my past experiences from NTPC, I have a habit of and I already have a habit of persistent reading, learning, and understanding. And with all this, I was gradually able to enhance my understanding on the latest international practices. And also, RVNL gave me ample exposure by organizing some visits to the tunneling projects in the India and around the country, around the world. And I, on this project, I am now able to implement all these learnings which I have gathered for so many years to the best of my capacity, and I'm able to fulfill my passion. So looking ahead, I would love to continue in this field, and would share the experiences I have gained with the government and private developers who want to develop a project of such magnitude in this area, in the Himalayas especially. And I definitely project planning and design has been my expertise now, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, really, really great. You've been managing such a huge project. It's such a difficult location where we have limitations on how material and machines and man can go there and start and work uh, with the geological challenges of Himalayas involved in this process. And then COVID has come along. How are you planning to cope up with the challenges of COVID? I can understand that the progress will be hampered by the availability of uh, people who are supposed to work on the project, laborers who are going to be there, and the supply of material. Probably the supply of steel is also going to hit uh, with with the industrial oxygen being used for the purpose of for the medical purposes. Is there a plan how you are uh, planning to go ahead to deal with this challenge?
Actually, frankly speaking, Sandeep, nobody could have planned for such a big calamity that has occurred. And when you speak of oxygen, the immediately it strikes to me the our works were simply stopped because oxygen is consumed for fabrication of rebar, for lattice girder fabrication and other steel sets. Oxygen is required, and one fine day, my contractor simply called me, I think around a month back, that sir, we have to surrender our oxygen for medical purposes and we cannot continue any further. So I asked him, like, how many sets have you fabricated in your store, lying in your store? So he said we have quite a few, but we cannot go beyond 10 days. So then we had to take a decision what to do, and definitely it was the calamity. The size, I mean, the calamity was so huge we couldn't cope up. It has affected us really badly. Even the laborers have migrated back to their states, many of them, and people are afraid to come out. And I mean, it's it has really changed the way we are working.
Yeah, that's true. Now we have to find new ways how we can still work efficiently with putting less people in danger, ensuring their safety, but still going ahead with the construction. That's really a challenge, and we don't know how long it's going to stay with us. But I'm sure we'll be able to find a solution to it. And you have been in a nice part of country. It's a beautiful part of Uttarakhand. Did you get to visit nice places while working on this project? And which one
Yes.
did you like the best?
Uh,
If you, yeah,
yeah.
can share.
When I recall this, actually, this state is a very beautiful state and situated in North India. It's almost 80% is mountainous, and I would put that actually it's very green. Two-thirds of it, I would say, it is green, and Uttarakhand is, as you everybody knows, it's called the land of gods, and it has prominent pilgrimage centers, uh, famously called the Char Dham, which is Badrinath, Kedarnath, Gangotri, and Notri. I visited few of these. I was able to get the opportunity to visit Kedarnath project, and sorry, I visited Kedarnath, Tungnath temple. So uh, I'm sharing few of the images during my visit. I hope my screen is visible. And then also with family, I went to places, other touristic places like Kanatal and Oli. Oli is a famous ski location, ski destination in Uttarakhand. And yes, that's it pretty much. We get to visit whenever we have some time. I am staying at Rishikesh, so like whenever I get, whenever it's a pleasant day, I try my best to take my family out for an outing.
That's great. I think that's the motivation of family to stay with you
Yes,
in
yes,
a in a in a more cleaner part of the country where they can breathe nice air. They can wake up in the morning with a nice view and have have healthy food and enjoy. Uh, I think this is a rare opportunity when your work
yes,
can bring you such adventures and such experiences.
yes,
Uh, so what I understood is that in such difficult scenario and uh, managing such big contracts is definitely a challenge. And being here in this country, uh, we have suddenly seen a huge surge in the tunneling market. Uh, we have seen requirement of large number of metro tunnels, highway tunnels, hydropower tunnels, railway tunnels across India, and I'm pretty sure it's going to rise. So while we do it, we are learning how to uh, manage the contracts, manage the projects as we move on, how to deal with the stakeholders such as contractors, designers, consultants, reviewers, and people who are involved in decision making, as well as people who are affected by the project. So contract management uh, and specifications that we set initially while we are creating the contract with various agencies plays a huge role. I understand that we having a limited exposure need to work a lot towards this, and I'm sure that your involvement in this area has been and your commitment to it has been really fantastic. Could you throw some light on what you have observed and what you have included in your contracts, which which is going to help the industry, and how it is going to impact or make the terms better?
Okay, so Sandeep, managing a contract is really a uphill task, especially when the either party starts becoming unreasonable, or they start to act simply contrary to the contractual understanding or the otherwise. So it is really a big challenge to manage the contracts with big contractors. Big names are there behind the contracts, and one needs to have absolute clarity on the on the spirit of the contract, the spirit with which it was framed. So it was important for us to understand that spirit with which we should frame our contracts on this project. And one good thing about my workplace is that I have full independence to work and take decisions, of course, with assistance and guidance of experienced people, senior experienced people in my company. And if I don't understand anything, I just go for it. I just go to the internet, I search it, I read textbooks, I go through the lessons learned documents of other projects. I refer to experts in my circle. I don't sit like that with the problem on this project. So whenever there is a problem, I go out all out for it. Coming to contracts, I would say that 30 to 40% of my efforts with my team on the project have gone into the framing of these so-called fair tender conditions for the tunneling contracts on the project. See, we in India, we don't have a standard tunneling contract form. We are just following from the late 80s or 90s. The thing is being repeated, and very few changes have happened in the contract. Neither we have a mandatory practice to adopt a well-documented risk reduction procedure during the execution of any project. So during the early stages of the project, our focus was primarily on the fundamentals. We address the fundamentals of equal risk sharing because to have a good understanding of the spirit with which contract is to be framed, you have to have a good understanding of the risk sharing. You cannot load all the risk to the contractor. You cannot take all the risk from the employer. So there has to be an equal risk sharing mechanism, and there has to be a mitigation measure in the contract to reduce the residual risk. So whatever risks have been allocated, how can they be mitigated? What will be the residual risk? How will it impact the project in upcoming time? And for all this, I refer to publications back in 2017, I would say, the Austrian practice of NATM tunneling contracts. It is a very well written practice handbook. One should definitely go through that book. It's freely available over the internet. And also there is a handbook on contracts in Norwegian tunneling. See, these two countries, they are very much ahead in terms of the way the tunneling is happening there. And the contractual practices of these countries, I found is at par with or I would say they are the best, among the best. I found them among the best. And then further, we had consultations with some experts in Austria and Norway in 2014 and 17, which made things quite simple. So in 2018, we started to try to understand where India is standing right now. The major clients like NTPC, THDC, USBRL. So how they understand the contracts, are they writing their contracts, how they are sharing the risk in their contract. We found that the risk sharing was not there at all. And in order to change these practices, we took a lot of steps. I'll just share few of the important issues and key takeaways which require attention of the project developers. So by the way, these are the two handbooks. The left one is the Austrian and the right one is the Norwegian tunneling handbook. And Sandeep, I hope my screen is visible. Okay. Now I think.
Yes.
Yeah. So these are the two publications which I was talking of. These are available over internet. One can just search them and download them and go through them. Try to understand what they say, why they say something in a particular fashion. And so broadly, I will just highlight the issues that were being faced by project owners in India. These were related to delayed completion, delayed commissioning, inflated cost because we have very high inflation in India. Then there were excessive variations, and there was an unclear risk sharing mechanism, which further led to cost and delays. There was no concept of deciding adverse geological occurrence or geological overbreak, which resulted in delays, and ultimately owner was supposed to pay the time and cost. The claim management was lacking as far as the scenario was there in India. There was a lack of trust. The arbitrations were happening for years together after the project was over, which all resulted in huge cost and time to everybody. I mean, not only the employer but also to the contractor. And the manpower in India has been not up to the required expertise. So the machine and material is also not compliant with the international norms. This all had resulted in a drop of the progress rates, and there were quality and safety concerns for the tunnel that were constructed. Also, when it comes to construction program management, so we were relying on bar charts without any linked resources. So what happened was, like, we were understanding a project sequence where there were no resource committed by the contractor. So how come you will achieve the progress when there is no resource? So this was it was a false promise from the contractor. So these were some of the issues that were being faced by clients like NTPC, THDC, USBRL, and many others. I am not naming all of them, but these are the issues in general which we observed needs to be addressed. And then we moved ahead with the key ideas that we should incorporate in our contracts. These were reliable geological reference model for correct project definition, and sufficiently detailed design of the tunnels, slopes, embankments to not affect the schedule. So before calling a tender, the design, in our opinion, should have been sufficiently detailed and as per the expected geology, and the investigations should have been carried out by the employer to have a reliable reference model of geology. And then the time and payment linked to the support sections rather than rock mass classification systems. So when you see old contracts of Indian tunneling projects, usually the payment for excavation was linked to the rock mass classification like RMR or Q or some other classification. But we thought that it is better to link it with the effort and time required by the contractor to install a particular support and excavate in a particular class. Mind you, this is all coming from the Austrian and Norwegian contracts, the way they are designed. And then we included GPR for the first time, perhaps to define the distribution of support sections, because we had an item rate contract. So GPRs usually in an item rate contract, they are not much of use. But still, in order to have a certain amount of responsibility on the side of employer as well as contractor, we defined a GPR. And in the GPR, we defined the support sections which are going to be installed, which can be expected. So, and then we also determined the realistic completion time frame, and the owner, I mean the RVNL, as RVNL, we shared our own construction sequence as if we were the contractor. So we were sharing these time frames right in the contract, right in the tender document. So like this is how it can be done in a way so that tomorrow nobody comes and says, oh, you have framed unjustified time period to complete this project. So we were doing all these things in the tender stage. And the biggest thing was that decision of the support section went to the owner. So the owner is supposed to carry the complete responsibility of the ground. The ground which is expected should be there, and if it is there, then what type of support has to be installed. So these were some of the uh, things which were which were taken care in our project. Also, the contractor is required to take the responsibility of the production rates. I mean, And to make that happen, in the contract we mentioned in the tender document, there was a form in which contractor was supposed to mention his commitment on the production rates against a particular set of tender drawings. So he is actually committing that he will perform by so and so progress rate if such and such support section is installed. So this all we are doing in the tender, and then upon award we were issuing the tender drawings as it is. I mean as GFCs. So our tender drawings on this project were as detailed as GFCs should have been. We were simply stamping the GFCs and issuing them immediately on the date of award of the contract. And we had kept a mechanism of transparent time extension on the basis of actual support sections installed and the actual time taken vis-a-vis the baseline requirement. So in the baseline, suppose there is a particular support section, there is a particular support section which is required to be installed, and if the support section is something else, so we are ascertaining the time committed by the contractor for that revised support. And if there is any benefit of time, then we are distributing that time between both the parties. Also, we had a good description of the ground convergence, pay lines, A lines, because these we found were lacking in almost all the contract specifications that I came across at least. And there was a huge problem that there were claims by the contractor in other projects which were not being responded to in a reasonable time frame. So we changed our contract specifications and we set out the timelines in which if there is any claim raised, then it should have been settled in a so and so manner and time frame. This is just showing you the table which we included in our contract, and this shows the predicted length, then the offered advance rate, offered excavation time, the anticipated length, and then the actual excavation time, and then the time loss or gain. So this was way back in 2018, second half, almost to 2019. And let me tell you, this thing has been adopted by the Emerald Book in July 2019. Not this table, but the philosophy behind this table. And I will just show you the clauses of the Emerald Book which were relating to this philosophy. It says for unforeseeable, when there is an impact on progress or cost due to conditions that are described in the GBR, then it shall be assessed as per 13.8. And then 13.8 says, if and to the extent the contractor suffers delay and or cost as a result of subsurface physical conditions actually encountered that are outside the limits described in GBR, then clause 4.12 will apply. So basically what we are saying that if there is any condition outside the GBR, it comes under unforeseeable condition. And because of that condition, we have to adjust the time and cost for the project. So ours being an item rate contract, cost was already being taken care of. What was not taken care of was the time. So with this table, we actually tried to take care of that time. So by this we mean the employer is taking all the risk for the varied geology, and the contractor is supposed to take all the risk for the offered advance rates. So these are some few things which were there, which we addressed in our contracts for this project.
Yeah, sounds really good. I think this sharing of risk between client and contractor plays a really important role. And with a location such as Himalaya, when we are building a tunnel there, there are very unforeseeable geotechnical conditions that even contractors would not be able to assess in initial geotechnical investigations. And no matter how detailed investigations we go for, there will always be some element of surprise. And involvement of client in taking that risk shows that the contractor has confidence on the project and support from the client to do this job, which I think is a very good step which has been involved by you in this project. And this only comes with the confidence of the client. If the client is well aware of how things are and how things will go, if client is confident that they can do this job, they understand the location, they understand the process of tunneling, then uh, then only this partnership uh, can work. And definitely it's a very good example of that. So I have also come to know that there are few advancement in the machinery that are being used in your project. Uh, so that's the execution part. Now I was talking about more about the contract part and the
Yes,
location
yes.
part. Now we can come to the execution part, and what your project has seen is change in terms of the machinery that we are using, which are more safer and are faster in terms of construction. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Hmm. Sandeep, actually, automation and machine learning are relatively new subjects when it comes to Indian tunneling, and these have not been tried out in the past. On this project, we are moving ahead in that direction to at least try and see what the benefits are there. Last week, also, the Honorable Minister for Road Transport and Highways laid a lot of emphasis on this automation. And this automation, by the way, is very well developed in the advanced developed nations. And they are using the data generated out of this automation because, all the automation helps in transparent data logging of the works. So they are using all this data to make their tunnel construction more sustainable. They're actually reducing the life cycle cost as well. So I would just say that automation actually is helping us in knowing what we are doing. It gives you a data log. It can forecast weak geology. It can make data available to all parties to improve their methodologies, to have a better decision making, and to reduce cost of the tunneling by highlighting the improvement in areas. Because when it comes to data, there is a statistics behind that which can be applied to that data and to have a meaningful result out of it. On this project, we made a small but proud beginning with 100% automation at least in the tunneling machines like drilling jumbos, then shortcut machines, grouting rigs, and tunnel profile scanners. And to cater to the training needs for these machines, because these machines are not something which is very common in India at least. So we were facing a very big challenge of how to make use of the current workforce of operators in India to train them for these machines. So as a small step, we took a small step to create these sort of simulator and training facilities for these operators right in our project office. And so whenever the operator joins our project, he gets trained at these facilities in our project office. And these are having the actual brain of the machine sitting in the room, and it can actually judge the performance of the operator or the training requirements, whether he is required to be trained in further aspects or not. So this is a small step that we have taken, and we are finding that the operators are feeling very convenient with these automatic machines, because gradually this mobile phone and all these advancements have also started coming up. So the operators are already having a good know-how of the graphical user interface from their mobile phones, and they are trying to correlate it with these sort of I would say displays inside the machines. So they are very much comfortable. And the benefits that we have already started seeing, is that there is a lot of reduction in the downtimes of these machines, because now they are more closely monitored. The monitoring is done in such a manner that even the Even the we are trying to ascertain the drilling average rates and the capacities. We are making assessments of one operator. We are comparing it to another operator. Why a particular operator is not able to perform, that also we are able to address, because with data logging, a lot of benefits are actually coming out now. And these machines are also measuring the measure while drilling parameters. So like the penetration rate, the thrust required to penetrate, then the rotation force, and all these things, they are getting recorded as the drilling jumbo is doing more and more drillings. So there is a software to analyze all this data and trying to ascertain whether there will be a weak geology coming up ahead or not. What it has actually helped us is also that the everlasting dispute on the GOB has gone now. On our project, we don't have a dispute of GOB anymore, because all the drillings, the automatic drillings, they are happening exactly as per the designed pattern. And operator does not have the freedom or flexibility to simply drill out of the way and create some sort of a big overbreak. So the GOBs have tremendously reduced, and this has indirectly helped us in avoiding the discussions and disputes, and also has helped the contractor in saving his cost and time. So we are having a good progress on the project with this, with all these developments.
Yeah, quite good to know. Definitely, this is the way ahead. Since it's such a complicated job, we need to use technology which can reduce these conflicts and save our time as well as money. Uh, do you have uh, any message for young professionals who are present here today uh, for our tunneling industry? What do you want to say if you have to give them
Well,
advice or something?
I would say that all the fresh tunnel engineers, actually, there is a dearth of field engineers for tunneling job, and people are not having overall knowledge of all the activities involved in tunneling. I would advise the young tunnelers to have a good grasp on the theoretical aspects of various subjects in tunneling, tunnel engineering, right from investigations to design phase, and the way we are executing blast design, and a lot of things related to even the quality of the shotcrete or the support steel sets. There is a lot of freely available publications already over the internet. I remember MIT Pune has also started a dedicated course in tunneling 3-4 years back. So I think, Sandeep, that these are good starting points for these aspiring engineers, tunnel engineers, to have a proper foundation in the field of tunneling. And I would also add that at job site, the focus should be always to correlate and connect with the various activities. So all the activities, there should be a connection sequence of these activities, and the engineers should develop an overall bigger picture of how small things affect the entire cycle time of tunnel. And a documentation knowledge, the know-how of documentation should be very good, because documentation is something which helps you in understanding where you have gone wrong, and or what has affected which has which event has affected the cycle time, why there is a delay. So yes, that's pretty much it, and I would wish best of luck to all the tunnel engineers.
Yes, definitely. Thank you, sir. This is the way to go. Uh, just finishing on your spare time. I think you would hardly get spare time when you have three projects in hand.
Hmm.
But but what do you do? What do you do? Now with COVID, you must have some time. Do you go out with family or have some hobby?
Sandeep, frankly speaking, earlier spare time was a luxury which we didn't have. We were running short on time, and But usually I used to travel to offbeat places in hills and with my family and stay there for 2 days, 3 days, and then come back and start working again. But during these days, as you said, during this COVID days, we are bound in our homes, and I am simply following my passion to keep myself updated on the latest technological advancements happening internationally by and the breakthrough advancements which are there over the internet, because internet is the best source of information we have these days. So I am trying to follow my passion, keeping myself updated.
Yeah, yeah, always the fun part. The tunneling, tunneling is always
Yes,
fun to have.
yes,
So you can't get a break in COVID as well.
yes.
uh, so now I would ask the attendees if they want to ask uh, any question with to Mr. Sumit or get and want to have an interaction one to one with them. They can raise their hand. We can unmute them uh, one by one, and then they can interact with him. Great. So we already have Mr. Manoj. Uh, I'll unmute Manoj. Yeah, Manoj. Now you can unmute yourself and go ahead, please. Manoj, we can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself first.
Sandeep, are you listening?
Yes, yes. Now you are audible. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Good morning, sir. This is Manoj Kumar from Embark Engineering. I'm a DDC for as a Sibok railway tunnel project. Yeah.
Yes, hello Manoj.
I have a small question. Yeah. Sometimes the DDC recommended some support of portal and inside tunnel, but due to unavailability of some accessories like permanent and delay in support, the contractor wants some relaxation. They want a self-drilling anchor instead of permanent anchor, which is recommended for more than 100 years, and short kit instead of cladding. So that time the client also recommended due to as a temporary solution to expedite the work or fast progress. But everyone knows the contractor will not do in later stage. So this is a very common issue in portal and tunnels. So what strategy we have to adopt with mutual understanding with client?
Manoj, it is very simple. Like rather to get stuck in any fait accompli situation, we should always we already have GFCs ahead of us ahead of time. So we should ask the contractor to arrange all the raw materials, not when he's about to start, but 2 months, 3 months back when he's about to start, when he's planning the material procurement. So our emphasis on this project is on material procurement to a huge extent, because we are asking contractor, we have written in the contract that he needs to have at least 1 month or 2 months supplies ready with him, irrespective whether it will be applied or not applied. So that is the reserve stock that which you should keep at site.
In this scenario, sir, we have issued the drawing 3 months before, but due to delay in planning and some issue like this accessories will come from Germany and other, so they give excuse, no, please give the temporary solution.
Yes, actually now it is a fait accompli situation, so nobody will ask you to stop the work. Everybody will say, no, no, you please come out with alternative with whatever we have right now with us. So the best thing is to plan your material procurement at least 3 months in advance. And the accessories from Germany, which you are telling us, they take 3 months. I know, I'm aware of those accessories.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Sandeep,
Now,
can we just go one by one with all the questions in the chat box first?
yeah, we could do that. I think somebody has already raised the hand. I'll just
Okay, fine.
so once they have all the one-to-one interactions, we can come back to the chat questions. I think it's Akshay. Akshay, you can go ahead, please.
Yeah. Hello.
Hello, Akshay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, Really impressive talk. What I just want to ask you something different from what the technicality we have discussed. I was really curious when you talked about your initial career and the progression which you took. I mean, that was something really inspiring there. I'm just want to know your thoughts that with your qualification in the start and with the way you wanted to have your career, did you ever thought to go towards private sector in your career? Or if you had, then I mean, now at your stage, what do you think that what are the positives you have being in the government as compared to you would have been in private, or there are few things which would have been better if you were in the private sector?
This is a very good question, and yes, the plus point in the government is that you need to you have opportunity to develop the projects. I mean, in the private sector, you don't have that opportunity unless you are the developer yourself. So in government sectors, which what my personal opinion is that you can have exposure to all the activities required to develop the project. You are the one who should know about each and everything, not to the full details, but at least to the level which is required to develop depending on the size of the project. Like a big project like this requires a lot of know-how, and definitely in private sector, if somebody is there, so people are like working more in their own expertise area, I would say. Like if somebody is a geotechnical engineer, he will not go into the survey or the alignment, and if there is any landslide we see in the field, then I mean, he's just there to design the way it is to be designed. I mean, with all the limitations that he has right now. But we as project developers in the government, we have the opportunity to change the alignment, because we know that it is a landslide area and we can change the alignment. Why not to change it in the stage one? And why to make it a fait accompli situation for the geotechnical engineer, or for, say, for example, for maintenance of that particular area in the future? So that is the plus point, which I feel that with my knowledge and my experience and know-how, I don't need to go into the phase two and all those softwares to design the tunneling. But what I feel is important is that there should be a good direction to any project for any success of any project, and developers are responsible to adopt the best way out by taking what is going on around the world in the field of tunneling. That cannot come from a private sector, I don't think. So those are my views.
Yeah, that's very true. Thank you.
I think we don't have more hands raised now, so I will go through the questions in the chat box. So Shweta asked, which other project across the world inspired you? Have you taken any specific inspiration and tried to implement them in your current project?
Yes, I would like to name few projects which we visited. Like when we went to Austria, we visited Koral railway project. It was the biggest project at that time in 2014, I would, if I remember correctly. And there were various lots in that project. So we visited almost all the 3 lots. And in one of the lot, TVM tunneling was planned. And we went to the segment factory. We saw the way they are maintaining the quality there. So we picked up some of the points for segment fabrication, and I would say the concept of mastering. What is mastering? Why is it required? And the way the logistics have been planned on that project for transportation of segment rings. So those were some of the takeaways for the TBM works. And coming to Norway, we went to Follow Line project. And then there was one project on the west coast, which was Oerlikon project. Both of these projects, they were in Follow Line, they were again using TPM. They had the hardest rock. and then what all tests did they carry out to assess the wearing of the cutters. So those things were good takeaways from there. Then in the Oerlikon project, they were facing some water ingress challenges. So how they were grouting, which machines they were using, the type of grout material that was helping them to grout. So those things we took from there, and we have implemented all these things on our project.
Yeah, great. That's true. There are things that we can learn from and definitely bring nice practices to our country. Then we have Lalita asking, as Uttarakhand is very hilly area and very much prone to landslides and other major climatic changes, what are the special safety protocols that are implemented for such special projects?
I would say yes, climate is changing around the globe as such, and not only Uttarakhand, but Uttarakhand is very sensitive to that change because the ecology is very sensitive here, and there are yes, it is prone to landslides also. But let me tell you, many of these landslides are actually they are related to human activities and they are anthropogenic in nature. So we are having special protocols of not to cut the hill slopes on the project. Mostly we are filling the tunnel muck to create platforms for the stations and without disturbing the natural slopes on the project. Only at some of the portals we are actually cutting the hills, but that is also the height of the cut is nowhere it is more than I would say 20 meters or so. And yes, these are some of the features that were implemented during the design stage. And when it comes to execution, we are having a protocol to connect with the state disaster management team. And we are following the weather updates which are released by the local district authorities. And we are keeping a caution like not to work during the night time when there is an advisory for very heavy rain or very unnatural sort of a climate. So those are some of the protocols that we are following on the project.
Yeah, great, thank you. Uh, Shweta asked, in terms of contractual specification, what's new in current project as compared to earlier major projects? What more can be done? Do you suggest any of X modifying any other suggestions such as modifying L1 concept, etc.?
I would say that we have not been able to come out of this L1 concept in India so far. There have been a lot of deliberations and discussions for L1 concept for consultancy contracts, but for construction contracts, we don't have any other way to do it. So we are going by L1 only. What more can be done? Like when you ask what more can be done, we can just ensure certain expertise of the contractor. Like if there is a specialized activity which is proposed in a particular package, so what we can ask is that the contractor should have done that activity somewhere else, and then he should have the technical competence on the for the manpower. So on our project, what we actually did all this on our in our tender documents. We asked the contractor to give out the names of all the manpower, the expert people which are they are going to implement, they are going to deploy on the project once they get the award. So these things were done in the tender document as a part of the change which is being asked. I think I have replied to this question.
Yeah. During your presentation as well, you have
Yeah,
also
it's
specified
contractual thing.
some
Yes.
things. So I think it's a very good idea how contractual changes and specifications have improved. Sarthak has asked few questions specific to project, such as what is the deadline of completion of project, which you have already shared in your presentation. What if the contractor fails to complete on time? So what sort of provisions do we have in contract to cater with the situation?
So it is not that we are waiting till the completion time to see if the contractor is failing or not. There are ways to check the performance of the contractor even during the first year or second year or third year. So we have provisions kept in the contract. By the way, we are following FITIC Red Book on this project. So we are, in addition to the FITIC Red Book, provisions have been kept to offload a contractor of particular activities if they are not giving the performance which they have committed in the during the bidding stage. So we are actually not waiting up till the completion period. We are taking, usually the action is being taken within the first year itself if somebody is not performing.
Yeah, agreed. It should be a regular process to monitor the progress. Uh, Another question from Sarthak is that in many projects in India, boomer operators, ground operators, and other manpower working are not as capable as expected for the project. Were there any provisions in the contract to deal with such issues?
Yes, so we had, as I shared, we had a simulator set up in our office for training these operators. So usually we don't find now the problem is there with any of the boomer operator or for that matter, even for grouting operations, we have service agreement. There is a requirement in the specification that contractor has to sign a service agreement with the OEM. And in that service agreement, there is a component of training kept by the OEM. So the people, the service engineers of the OEM are staying on our site because of this specification requirement, and they are training the operators of the project right on the during the job. So because it's a big step for us to directly transfer everything into the automation era, we cannot we have to bear some time and cost in all these upgradations, because if we don't do it, somebody else has to do it. So we thought that it's better that we at least start with this, and towards the completion of the project this will actually help us. So we can face hiccups for the first year maximum, but then second, third, fourth, fifth year they will be getting expert in their operations, and it will help us a lot.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Then Aditya has asked that recently some TBMs have got stuck on another project in Uttarakhand. He understands that it is a different project, but difficult project, but he is always curious to know how such situations are handled. Anything you might have heard of or any steps you recommend in such situations?
See, TBM can be stuck up for a lot of reasons. The reasons can be operational reason. The reason can be lack of grouting behind the segments. The reason can be a very fast progress of the TBM and getting stuck into a weak zone. The reason can be stopping the TBM for interventions in the weak geology, where it is squeezing and very fragile. So there are a lot of things to be kept in mind when we are going with TBMs in Himalayas, because it's not a luxury that we can stop anywhere just to check if the things are going on correct. There needs to be zones defined where to stop, where not to stop. These zones should be checked by way of ISP or the beam, which is both are geophysical methods, which are systems mounted on the TBM. There has to be a constant probing ahead of the TBM. So uh, perhaps in the project, I will not comment why they got stuck there, but these are few of the my opinions which should be done for TBM projects to avoid such stuck up.
Yeah, that's true. It's always challenging to have TBMs in such geology, but I think there are a few things that can also be taken up. I think we should have somebody from TBM manufacturing unit always on site to monitor any changes and to change the cutter heads or to do the intervention when required when the geology changes. And the design of the TBM, the very first step, is very important because uh, if we know what kind of geology we are going through, or if we know that we don't know about what kind of geology we are going through, in both these cases, we need to have somebody who can suggest the best type of TBM. There are many such TBMs like mid-shield TBM or crossover TBM, uh, which are being developed. There are many technologies that are coming up to cater with various kind of geologies with the same TBM with the same cutter head. So I think it's just finding out the right solution while balancing the cost versus the outcome of the project. So that's what Arvinel is doing. That's what Mr. Sumit is introducing to the project, and it's really interesting to see such things
Sandeep,
happening around us.
getting back to this TBM issue, I would say that in our tender specifications, we had actually defined quite a lot of features which were required to be mounted on the TBM. And we mentioned a few safety requirements like it should be a shielded TBM. We didn't mention if it is a double shield or a single shield. So we left the option to the contractor. We mentioned certain things by way of which contractor gets a fairly good idea of how the TBM should what all features it should have. And this actually helped us a lot because I would say that from the date of award of the contract, our TBM order was placed within 40 days of the award. And this is the fastest by far as any standards around the world. The TBM is not being ordered that fast anywhere.
That's true. That's true. That's a great achievement, and congratulations for that. To take decisions at such early stage is very important to finish the project at time. Uh, Moving on to the next question from Sarthak. He says that I request RVNL to recommend contractor and PMC to hire fresh candidate and not only the experienced staff, so that knowledge can be transferred to such people. What do you have to say about this?
I would say that there is a possibility to induct a few fresh candidates, even if they don't have any experience. But that doesn't mean that it will be a sort of a guarantee to work. And mind you, it will be through PMC, of course. We cannot force our contractors to hire you. So we can ask, but definitely ask our PMC to hire a trainee candidate because of no experience, so that can be managed, but in a very few and deserving cases.
Yep. I think lots of people are getting motivated and thinking about working in the industry, which is good. Which is the whole idea behind this talk, so that they can talk to people with experience and get inspired. Next question is from Amit. He says, uh, I request you to please inform, is there any integration model planned for this project, like we do for MRTS, where multiple transport systems come together? So do you have any such news? Is there any other transportation system being integrated with this?
I don't think, because the way we work in the state, we don't have coordination with other projects. We even don't know if there is any MRTS going to come up in this area. There is no information regarding that. So once the information is there, then perhaps we can do something. But as on date, there was nothing. So we didn't plan for it.
Yeah, it was. I think the population that we have there and the amount of people that are moving, it will take some time for people to go
Yeah,
there
yeah.
and have a multiple transit system. So maybe a question for the future, I guess.
Yes.
Jagdish asked that if any contractor quotes unreasonably low amount and gets L1, then is there any provision of how to ask him for methodology or project program to and how they are going to complete it? Do they have to prove to the client in some way?
Unreasonably low bids. There can be unreasonably low bids, but there was a condition in our. Again, it boils down to the strategy that you're adopting to cater to this situation. So in our contract, there was a condition that if there is an unreasonably low bid, the contractor has to submit some additional bank guarantee. And submission of bank guarantee was really tough in the 2021 because there was a financial crunch with everybody. So we tried to adopt these conditions to get rid of such bids. And it has helped us. We didn't have any unreasonable bid on the project. The lowest which we had was minus 10%, which I think it is quite reasonable.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Akshay, are you still there?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Sorry, I took the Q&A session by
No issue, no
mistake.
issue.
We were supposed to take it. I think I just went with the flow. I was talking to Mr. Sumit and could not realize it. Could you do the honors to close the talk, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Samit sir. I mean, you have not just talked about your personal journey, your career, but also many things which we definitely need in India. When we compare it to other countries, especially which are good and well ahead in tunneling, there is a good integration of academia, the government and the private sector, so that they work together and the contracts are executed really smoothly, nicely, and it is really heartening to see that our government sector is also trying to move in that direction, which we desperately need. And the scope of tunneling is huge in India, as we all know, and hopefully this will start a new beginning. Thank you for sparing your time. You have been really encouraging to all of us, and also very positive in the way you have described things. And knowing that your schedule is tight, we are special thanks to you. Special thanks to Sandeep, also to convey the talk and make it a nice informal interaction in the end. We look forward to doing such interaction in future as well, and have more participation from our young members. And I mean, especially for our young members, this kind of interaction are great. They can talk one-on-one to someone experienced and well knowledgeable person like you. So thank you everyone for joining. We hope you liked it. We would definitely love to receive your feedback on this activity which we have started today. Samit sir, even if you have any feedback, we will be really helpful. We'll be really grateful to implement in our next things to come. And everyone else, thank you so much for joining. Have a good weekend. Stay safe, and let's hope we all come back from this pandemic more strong and more happy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.